What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. It's spooky season, and it's been a while. One might say it's been 28 years later. This is a review of 28 years later, in case you couldn't pick up on. That would be weird if I just said 28 years later and then I was like, this is a review of Dumbo or something else. Anyway, it's Halloween and we're watching movies like this. So, yeah, I put off watching 28 years later until the appropriate moment in time when it made sense. So, we've got Danny Boyle back directing, we've got Alex Garland writing, and we have in the cast Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jodie Comer, and Ray Fiennes are the notable cast members here. There's also an actor playing a young boy. Some people really loved his performance. I think they didn't give him enough. It's all just like one note. We'll talk about it anyway. Uh, this is a sign of the times for me, especially when you watch the three films in succession and you see sort of what Danny Boyle does in 28 Days Later, and with not as much, in the budget. He doesn't have, at the time, that cast, they're much bigger names now, but they weren't as big back then. They were, known character actors, but they're not huge stars. Now he's getting, Aaron Taylor Johnson after he's already played Quicksilver, and Jodie Comer, who's already been fairly well known after Killing Eve, and of course Ray Fiennes, Academy Award nominee Ray Fiennes. So these are not really small actors struggling for the performances, and also like the film is totally different. It's just I know it's like 28 years and like things evolve, but I don't think that this universe actually evolved naturalistically. I think what happened is that the way that we view zombie films is what evolved. The way that gore has changed in films, because when 28 Days Later came out, we weren't focusing so much on gore. We hadn't even really gone through the torture porn aspects of Saw and Hostel and movies like that when we got 28 Days Later, when he first filmed that. So ultimately, a lot of what the influences were based off of Romero, which, yeah, I mean, some of that stuff is gory. Certainly, there are some of Romero's of the Dead franchises are gory, but also they're they're a different pace, they have a different speed, there's a different vibe, there's a different set of survival. It's more realistic. It's more a lot of things like that that feel out of the original. When you go back to the original Night of the Living Dead, there's a little bit of realism here. I don't. There's nothing like that here. This is weird. There's like an alpha, and I don't know. There are just these weird torture moments, and there are jump scares, but they're not earned. The film is much more concerned with being uh like proving its point. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can play with the big dogs, give us the money. I'm far less interested in watching Bone Temple now as a result of this, because I know that this is the direction we keep moving in. And 28 weeks later already starts moving in that direction. It already starts going in the, well, we have more money, we have an expanded cast, so we're going to shoot bigger scenes. We have the money to do these visual effects, so we're going to use them. Our infected are going to be different. The rage virus here doesn't even feel like the rage virus in the first movie. It just feels like it just feels like any old wild zombie movie. Like, this could have been done for anybody. There's nothing that is so linked to the 28 concept here that you couldn't have just removed the title and renamed it something else. You know, uh, Return of the Dead, like, could have been the title for this movie. I don't think anybody would have thought that this was connected or was intended to be connected to the 28 franchise. I mean, there's a little bit of a mention of a rage virus, but you change like 3 lines of dialogue, and then what is there to resemble? You know, nothing really. Um, so it's sort of a two-part story in that you have a boy who is going to go out with his father, and he sort of learns survival skills, I guess you could say. His father is kind of like, well, you need to learn how to do this in order to survive because this is the world we live in. And I'm like, okay, we've done this before. This is The Walking Dead, you know? This is when Carl finally got old enough as an actor where they could have him hold a gun on screen. So, you know, yeah, I get it. So, and same thing with later on when it becomes Kaylee Fleming on Walking Dead, and she has to make a lot of tough calls and kill certain people. It's interesting when children are the ones that have to stand up and be the ones to save the family, and I get that that's what the draw for 28 Years Later is. But man, it's just, the film is just sort of like relentlessly hyper. It's like it's got a completely different energy level to it, and you don't realize it until you kind of marathon the movies, which is what I did. I waited until I could watch all 3 of them. You know, if I was doing this theatrically, I guess I would have watched 2 of them at home and then gone to the theater. Totally possible, but it was nice to sort of watch them in succession, you know, and see the progression, because I appreciate 20 Days Later now more. Even though it's not my favorite zombie movie, I appreciate what he was doing with it, because it's just more interesting, like the way that he does the rage virus. And I think the jump scares work more. Here, they're typical sort of cheap jump scares that we do now all the time. Like there was one of them was like a fox, you know, it's just like, they introduce these animals, and then again, like random gore. There's a scene where they find like a deer, like the deer head or whatever, and it's been like torn from a deer, and it's got part of the spine still attached to it. And in the audio description, which excellent audio description by William Michael Redman, by the way, there was something about how we got like a flashback of the zombie attack on that deer and having the head ripped off. I'm like, what is even happening here? Who watched the first 28 Days Later and was like, well, this is the logical progression. This is where 28 Years Later would go. As much as I recap Daryl Dixon now and I go, where are the walkers? At least that feels like we've made some sort of logical progression, because, and that show that's been living on air in some form for like 15 years. So we've seen them like slowly increasing the story, and the communities have been rebuilding. So we're not making these huge jumps in time. So I guess the comparison isn't entirely fair, but there have been other instances where we've seen, like, well, there's been this and the community's rebuilding and we're trying to get back together. Last of Us has done that. You know, there are other franchises and films and stuff like that that there's a zombie outbreak and now we're years later, and society has started to regain footing. And here it looks as like, even though in 28 weeks later, it ends with that shot of the zombies running around in like Paris, this one is all like, well, the zombie horde was pushed back to the island of, the Britain, and just left, and we just left them to die, figuring that it would, which, cool. But the thing is, like in 28 Weeks Later, they also have at the beginning, they talk about how the rage virus died out, like, and then somehow, but it didn't really, and then like the military came in. And so there, I guess after the 28 days, there was a point between the 28 days mark and essentially the 6 month mark of 28 weeks later, where the infected had started to die off mostly, but the rage virus was still out there, so it was still able to infect people who weren't, I guess, protecting themselves. So here it's just whatever. It just feels like willy-nilly. It feels like we're just doing this because somebody wanted us to. We wanted to come back. We planned a trilogy and we never got around to finishing it. And Danny Boyle has the time now. So it feels... And Alex Garland also has become a lot better filmmaker since then. This is beneath him at this point, considering the last couple things that we've seen Alex do. I'm not sure that this necessarily has risen to the top of the Alex Garland. I mean, the last film that he directed was Warfare, which is like infinitely better than this. So co-directed with Ray Mendoza. This is okay, but it's still, I feel like it's a continuing step down. I think some people will love this because they'll love the sort of hyper violence take on 28 whatever later. But I don't know that it makes any, I don't know that it complements the original project. It just sort of continues to further deviate from the original concept, and Bone Temple feels like we're just going to continue to deviate even more. It's sort of like watching the Fast and Furious franchise, and you watch the first one and you're like, okay, so this is a film about street racers in LA and a cop is infiltrating them, sort of like Point Break, right? And because he can be a street racer too, and he's trying to figure out who's been stealing these things. And then along the way, it gets like, okay, so we're in Tokyo now, and these aren't even the same cast members, and nobody's infiltrating to try to figure out a crime. We're just following street racers in Tokyo. Okay, and then later on, it's like, oh, so Dominic Toretto is now a super spy. He went from being a street racer to a super spy. Oh, okay. And then you get to like F9 or F9, and they're sending them into space. And you're like, what the fuck is even happening in this franchise anymore? It's kind of what I feel like is going to be the projection, the trajectory for 28 years later. Like right now, we're at the point where we've made Dominic the spy. And I liked Fast Five. I liked Fast Five. I liked Fast Furious 6 and Furious 7. I think those are strong films, but they're cheesy and they're goofy compared to what the initial setup for that franchise was. It just doesn't even make any sense. They're just well-directed films, and so therefore I fully acknowledge the fact that people will like 28 years later, but it is also a film that doesn't feel like it actually fits in with its franchise. So, which is the argument that you can make about the Fast and Furious franchise, which is the sequels make no sense considering considering the initial trajectory of the franchise. Sometimes we do things and they're just like, well, fuck it, we're just gonna do it and see what happens. Jason X is a great example of that. Like, why is Jason in space? Like, how'd he get there? That doesn't make any sense. Like, didn't he die? Like, wasn't Jason Goes to Hell? And now he's in space? It was like the next, anyway. So, yeah, it just kind of feels like we are deviating. And the worst thing about it is that we're deviating with the people who originally made it. So it's like he's endorsing it. It's like Danny Boyle is coming in and saying, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. So it'd be like, if Brian Robbins came back and started directing the Fast and Furious franchise again, it was like, yup, this is entirely what I had planned for the franchise. Like he closes it out with Fast 11 or whatever, comes back to the franchise. And it's like, yeah, this is what I had been planned in store the whole time. We were always going to, I don't know, go to the Earth's core. I don't even know what they're going to do. Are they going to travel in time? Like, where do you go after you've been through to space? Like, where do you go from there? Like, what is next? And actually, I think Mission Impossible had the same problem too, because they kept increasing the stunts, and Tom Cruise kept doing cooler and cooler shit. And then finally you get to Final Reckoning and you're like, I don't even know what to do anymore. Like, you're running out of things for him to do. And there's some things where it's just like, Tom's like, I don't know, maybe I don't want to. I mean, I suppose I could fly to space and then jump out of a spaceship and then plummet, free fall through the entire, but it feels like they're at that kind of level. Like, what else does he do in this in this series? So I don't know what Bone Temple is going to do, but the trajectory that we're doing just seems like, with a lot of other franchises, they keep doubling down, but it's in the wrong direction. It's not in a creatively strong direction. It's just in the popcorn entertainment direction. So if you think that there's an artistic strength to 28 Days Later, we're not headed in that direction. We're headed in the look at the shiny object direction. Isn't that cool? Ooh, look at that gore. We're big into gore now, which is fine. There's a time and place for that. But I don't think the first film was terribly gory. They didn't have the money for it. And now we're like rediscovering and inventing what we can and can't do, and everything is trying to one up the other films. And people have a completely different comfort level of what they're willing to sit through in terms of violence than they were when 28 Days Later first came out. We have shown people so much. Like I said, the torture porn genre hadn't even happened. So like sitting through all of those films, all that stuff that people watched for years, that had very little plot and were all about these traps and the setup and the gore and all the saws and hostels and green infernos and I don't know, human centipedes or whatever. All that shit hadn't even happened yet. So now we're the other side of that, and now we're at where The Substance gets a Best Picture nomination, which I love The Substance. I think The Substance is a great film. But when you look at the level of violence and the fact that we were able to get that into the Best Picture race, that's amazing. So, and Danny Boyle just is going in that direction. So from the director of Slumdog Millionaire comes 28 years later. The performances are okay. I think the kid is given a mostly reactionary performance that I think most kids could have given. I think he's a little overpraised. I'm not slamming child actors. He didn't do anything for me special where I thought like, oh my God, he's carrying this movie. Like some people have felt that. I didn't feel that. Maybe I was just in general overwhelmed with the film. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't love 28 Years Later. And I'm not excited for the next film, which is coming only like months after. This feels like what we're seeing sort of with The Strangers, where they're already gambling on it and they already have it made. And they're like, well, we're pretty sure this 28 Years Later thing is going to work out. So let's go ahead and make the other film. But what if it doesn't? Because now we're stuck with 3 Strangers movies and they're all going to suck. So that franchise is not going to change because they shot it all at the same time. So they didn't even get feedback. They didn't even get a chance to course correct and build and hear people's thoughts and go, well, okay, so people didn't love that, but they loved this, so let's lean more into this and not that. Now Bone Temple is going to be headed in the same trajectory. So, and probably deviate even further. without the style and the substance of Danny Boyle and Alex Garland behind it. So I struggle with this because it's like right on the bubble for me. Like I said, taking it as like a Fast Five type of film, I could see where people would like it. But for me, it's not my favorite zombie movie, certainly. And where the reason I slide rotten on this is I don't even have characters that I'm sustaining over the course of a franchise. So where the Fast and Furious movies, I get to see these characters evolve in silly directions. At least I get to stay with the same characters that I liked, and see them build out their family. And we introduce new characters. We bring in actors like Natalie Emmanuel and Dwayne Johnson, and then they end up becoming, core parts of the franchise. And it just grows from there. Here, it's like new people every time, and it's just the perception of what the world should look like, and where this rage virus goes. It feels less shaped by the intentionality of Danny Boyle in 28 Days Later, and more shaped by how film looks at zombies and how our audiences are willing to accept a higher level of violence and gore now than they were back then. It hasn't even been that long. 28 Days Later was still in a post 9/11 world. So just in a somewhat short window of time, we've changed a lot, and this reflects that. But I'm not sure it's for the better. So I'm gonna give 28 Years Later a 5.7 out of 10. I'm gonna go rotten on it. Sorry. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I will see you guys on the other side.